Thanks, Joe, for reading that long scripture reading. Much appreciated. In 1934, Fred Coots wrote the now famous song, "Santa Claus is Coming to Town." In it, we are told to better watch out, to make sure we do not cry, to make sure that we do not pout. And he's telling us why. It's because Santa Claus is coming to town. It's a song that highlights that good behavior is rewarded and bad behavior isn't. And in some way, the watchful eye of Santa is upon us. As a child, I wholeheartedly believed this, especially at Christmas time. I treated every response to my wants and needs as a test, trying to ensure that I would respond correctly. Though Santa is fictional, the song highlights a fact about life. Not that Santa is watching our words and our action, but someone greater is. God. That God provides circumstances in our lives where our faith is tested, whether we'll respond in faith or in unbelief. This is true for us today, and it's true in our passage this morning. For Israel, it is said in Deuteronomy 8, verses 2 and 3, that God tested the people to know what was in their hearts, that he would humble them, letting them hunger to feed them with manna, that they would know that man should not live on bread alone, but man should live on every word that comes from the mouth of God. In Deuteronomy, Moses tells us the purpose of this test that we read of this morning. It was to expose the hearts of God's people, in turn humbling them and feeding them, not just by bread, but by his word. So this passage is a test for the people of Israel, and in it, their hearts are exposed. In these verses, we see 4 different heart postures: the heart of comparison, the heart of scarcity, the heart of restlessness, and the one positive heart attribute or posture is the heart of recollection. And these 4 heart postures will serve as our outline this morning. So let's look at the heart of comparison. The chapter opens by telling us how long the people of Israel have now escaped slavery. It says that they had departed from Elim on the 15th day of the 2nd month. Commentators believe that this is approximately 1 month after they had fled from Egypt. And on this anniversary, the people of God take a moment to thank God for saving them. Is that what the text tells us? If only. No, the passage tells us that the people of God grumbled. Look at verses 2 and 3. In them we are told that the people say it was better for God to have killed them in Egypt, where they had an abundance of meat and bread, instead of bringing them into the wilderness where they are met with scarcity, that they were to die in the wilderness. If you know the story of the Exodus, you know that their lives were not that lavish in Egypt. But this is the accusation the people bring before Moses and Aaron, but ultimately against God. In many ways, grumbling is but a symptom of grumbling is a symptom of the heart of comparison. We know that comparison is the thief of joy, but we so easily succumb to it. And if we stay there long enough where we are comparing, it will bubble over into grumbling and complaining. In it, we believe that we deserve better, that we know better, and that it should have happened our way. In many ways, complaining is one of those respectable sins. We both think that it's okay for us to do, but also invite others to grumble and complain. We just simply often use a different word, like vent, saying that if we vent, then we will feel better. And maybe we do, But I tell you that is so short-lived. What complaining is doing is that it's scratching the itch of Eden. It is putting you and I in the place of God, saying that we know better. And in this instance, Israel is comparing their lives in the wilderness to what they had in Egypt. Comparing their life of freedom to a life of slavery. And complaining that once what they had in slavery is somehow better than what they have in freedom. What they say is that we're going to die either way, at least we had food in Egypt. Complaining is birthed out of comparison. And what we must see is that we do this all the time. It's not just an Israelite problem in the wilderness. By statements like, life was so much better without kids, or so much easier without kids. Life was nice when I was single. Or we can do this with thoughts of the future. Life will be better if I have this job in this city, at this church, at this house, with this spouse. Or maybe it's not a comparison to an old life or a new life. Maybe you're comparing yourself to somebody else's life. You're peering over the fence and wondering if there's something better. And if you stew on that comparison long enough, you will be led to grumbling and complaining. And in complaining, we not only put ourselves in the place of God, we mischaracterize God, and we mischaracterize our previous life, our present life, and our future circumstances. What we see here is whether they are daydreaming about Egypt or peering over the fence of infinite possibilities, both are fictional. These Israelites have a sense and form of nostalgia, making them think of their old lives and somehow making it sound better. And this is what nostalgia does. This is what comparison does. In some way, it inflates and conflates previous scenarios so that we believe these false realities. When we think of the good old days, or when we desire a neighbor's life, you're focusing on the silver lining, and somehow that's going to be sweeter. Not to say that those moments in life weren't positive, but often we're looking at only the part and not the whole. Many commentators doubt that what the Israelites say of their life in Egypt was true. But even if it was, we know that their life was bad. That they were being exploited to build bricks with no materials. That they were being told that they should kill their children or their children would die. This is not an ideal life. And you might be wondering, why did they operate like this? Why did they think that life was better? It's because they're human. Just like you and I, we so easily conflate and inflate and compare, wanting what was, what could be, and what never was. At our best, we can be just like the Israelites, thinking that God is holding out on us. At our worst, we think that God is out to harm us. And so what is God's response to this heart of comparing, to this nostalgic tale? Is it to kill them like they had asked or said? No, God's response is to supernaturally feed them. He gives them bread and meat to the full. He litters the ground with quail at night, and bread rains from the heavens in the morning. Instead of killing them, he yet again saves them and provides for them and instructs them. Though they complain, though they compare, what does God do? He calls them near. Look at verse 9. And in verse 10, he appears to them in his glory. And in verse 12, he tells us that he not only provides bread from heaven, but he does this so that they would know him. that they would not live on bread alone, but every word that comes from the mouth of God. God doesn't give them coal for their bad behavior. He doesn't somehow stay unknown, dropping gifts from the sky. He graciously provides for their need despite their comparison and complaining. And he reveals himself in power so that the people would know him. And the same is true for you and I. The situation you're in, whether you're wanting food, joy, peace, security, community, success, God is not holding out on you. He is leading you and providing for you. It might not be what you want in this very moment, but God is giving you more. He's giving you himself, that we would know him. What we see in this passage is that correction comes by a way of connection. Some of you might be wondering, as I say all of this, is complaining really a sin? And I'd say yes, it is, if you are doing it between fellow man and fellow woman. But when you're doing it right, it is when you are bringing your complaints to God. Doing it well brings you to God. And as you consider these things with God, this is what we see in the Psalms. And I would call this not grumbling, but this is what the Bible calls groaning. We know that something isn't right, that something isn't the way that it should be, and that things need to change in our life. And instead of going to somebody that can't change things in your life, like a friend, a spouse, a pastor, we are to turn to God. And this doesn't mean that we can't share our burdens with one another, but I ask you to question your intent. Is it just to vent? Or is it so that the other person would join you in praying and asking for God's help? But hear this, church. Even when we fail and we grumble, God still responds in his grace. That's what we see in this passage. Giving his provision might be not what we want, but he does tend to our needs because he knows them. But most importantly, he gives us himself that we would know him. And so we've seen the heart posture of comparison. Now let's look at the heart of scarcity. Look at verse 13. God provides bread from heaven and quail in the evening. The word manna is explained to us in this verse. It says that it is, what is it? Manna isn't the subcategory of some mystery of something else. It's just the name of what is it. The people saw it and they called it as it was. They don't know what it was. It was what is it? Manna. We can think of it like elven waybread from the Lord of the Rings. It's giving them nourishment as they are going through the journey. In verses 16 to 21, they're instructed practically how they partake of this. How are they to partake of God's provision? He tells them to take what they need, to take 1 omer for each person in their household, and that would be sufficient, that they were to do this every day, that God would give them daily bread. They were supernaturally given God's provision, but the people of God still doubt whether God's abundance was enough. They are fearful of whether it was enough. So what do? They try and do something what many of us might see as wise. Verse 20 tells us that they save some food for later, and that food breeds worms. This passage is not condemning leftovers, but instead it is to focus on the faith of the people. They did not believe that God will provide continually. They did not believe that what God gave them was enough. This keeping of leftovers was not wisdom, it was faithlessness. They doubted the sufficiency and consistency of God's provision, so they try and hold on to it. You and I can doubt God's provision just like the Israelites here. You can think the ways that you try and hoard and keep what God is called to be temporary. Much of life falls in this category, whether it's finances, food, family, or friends. What do we have that God has not given us? God is the giver of all good gifts, and he may allow for us to have his gracious provision that may exist for a day, a month, a season, or a lifetime. But the reality is that we do not set the terms of existence. He does. We can enjoy what he gives in the portion that he provides as long as that he allows. And missing this can lead us to spoil and to stench. And what we see in all of these things, just like manna, is that God's provision is abundant and sufficient. But the flip side of scarcity is the heart of restlessness. So let's move to point 3. Both question God's sufficiency to provide. Scarcity fears not having enough. Restlessness fears needing more. In both instances, the people of Israel do not listen to the command that was given to them. Verse 27 tells us that some of them went out to gather on the Sabbath, even though that they were to gather twice as much the day before. The heart of restlessness drives us to overwork, to think that we need to go beyond God's given provision. God called the people of God to rest from their work, to rest from their consideration of getting food. He calls them to simply enjoy his provision and to enjoy him, a day of solemn rest. This is the first time that the Sabbath is commanded in the scriptures. Moses reiterates it in the 10 Commandments and throughout the law, but it's first given in the context of this narrative. And in it, God makes clear that he has given the Sabbath both as a command and a gift. It is not an arbitrary rule, but it's to aid in the flourishing of God's people, to rest from all work just like he did. The seventh day of creation, when God rested, signified the totality and sufficiency of his work. And as we rest, we share in that imagery, seeing our work, our family, our food as sufficient. This rest is but a taste of the life intended for us with God. That we would not look to provision, but we would look to the provider. For that one day, the Lord's day, that we would seek him, enjoy him, and enjoy what he's given. Not looking for more, not looking beyond what he has, but instead enjoying him and what he's given. This is rest. We, like the Israelites, can so easily go looking for what God has already given. I believe this is what the writer of Ecclesiastes says, that labor can be like a striving after wind. You're grasping that you're not getting. It's because God has already given and he calls you to rest. The restless heart leads us to overwork, striving after wind, looking for more, what God has already given, sufficiently and abundantly. We can rest on the Lord's day, enjoying the provision and enjoying the provider as God intended. The last heart posture, the one positive heart posture that we see in this passage, is captured in verses 31 to 36, the heart of recollection. verses 31 to 36 tells us Moses memorialized manna so that the people of Israel will remember God's provision. This deals with the issue of forgetfulness. The people of Israel were a people prone to forgetfulness. We see this throughout the scriptures, even within the book of Exodus. They so easily forgot God and his provision towards them. And in memorializing the manna, they were to remember how God provided for them, that his provision was sufficient to save, to nourish, and to preserve till they came to the promised land. And as we think about this, I want us to consider, doesn't this passage sound familiar? I want us to remember the greater bread from heaven, Jesus Christ. Despite our sin, God calls us out, not to stay where we were, instead that we would come near, so that we would be fed, so that we would know him, to recall him, to enjoy him, to feast on him till we come to the true promised land, the new heavens and the new earth. Jesus in John 6 tells us that he is the true bread from heaven, the one by whom we not only live day by day like the Israelites here, but we will live forever. Though we are grumblers and sinners, Christ comes to give us what we need to live, not just in this life, but in the life to come. All of these longings for better are fulfilled in Jesus Christ. All the nostalgia, all the comparisons are all yearnings for the new heavens and the new earth, the life to come. Though they are sinfully expressed, we want good things. That want for ease, joy, or peace, they are promised to us in Jesus Christ. And in him we get to experience them in part today, but in full with him in life and the next. But we, like the Israelites, might wonder, is Christ truly sufficient for our joy, for my peace, for my stability, for my security? We can be tempted by scarcity and restlessness. And this can take forms that contribute to thinking our salvation is insufficient, thinking that we need to somehow maybe add works or effort, that we need to maybe find the promises of God elsewhere in the created order instead of Christ himself. Consider, where is this true for you? Dear Christian, would you see the provision of Christ? And would you rest in him today? Know the abundance and sufficiency of him afresh today. As Ben and I discussed this passage, we realized, and I thought it was really well emphasized by Joe as he read it, that these people are eating the same meal every day. They're eating manna for 40 years straight. And if you know this story well, you'll know that these Israelites die after those 40 years. And as we reflect on this, we coined the phrase, the monotony of manna. And it was what nourished them and saved them and preserved them was the same thing every day. And you and I might be tempted to think, is there something else I need to put in my diet? Is this all? Does it really begin and stop with Jesus? Can't I have something else? Oh, church, would we see that which sustains us, saves us, is not flavorless or monotonous. Instead, would we see that Christ is sweet and true, sweeter than honey, more precious than gold? Would this increase our awe and wonder of how a great salvation he provides? As the psalmist says, would you taste and see that the Lord is good? Maybe some of you in this room, maybe you experienced that for the first time today. Would you come to know the true bread of heaven, Jesus Christ, being saved and nourished by him till he comes again? And as you think of this holiday season, would you see that God is not like Santa? That yes, he is seeing your behavior, but he knows that you're not going to pass the test. That is why he gives us the gift of Christ, that we would have life everlasting to all who believe. Let's pray.